This story will blow your mind. Welcome to Informant's Lawyer X, a Wondery Plus exclusive hosted by famed prosecutor Marsha Clark. Wondery is the podcast studio known for favorites like Dr. Death, Business Wars, and much more. And Wondery Plus is where you'll get exclusive true crime podcasts like Informant's Lawyer X, as well as early access to top true crime podcasts, bonus episodes, and more, all in an ad-free listening experience. I'm even going to give you 60 days for free. Just head on over to wondery.fm/lawyer60 and type in the coupon code lawyer60 at checkout. If you call yourself a true crime fan, then you need this. Informant's Lawyer X is a story about Nicola Gabo, an attorney turned police informant. She represented Australia's most notorious drug lords and gangsters, but at the same time was feeding law enforcement all their secrets, completely playing both sides. The people she swore to defend, she was actually backstabbing. I can't believe how this ends, and you need to find out for yourself.
Do you know Sydney Sweeney helped catch a criminal using nothing but her Ring doorbell? Sydney Sweeney is a 27-year-old actress, well known for her roles in Anyone But You and also the new-ish horror film Immaculate, which is amazing, by the way. I would definitely go and see it if you haven't already. But did you know she can also catch criminals from her phone? On the 14th of October, she was busy filming her new role in a boxing film in North Carolina when she noticed something on her phone. She spotted on her Ring doorbell what looked like a random person snooping around outside her house. She was obviously disturbed by this and rang police and informed them of what was going on. This prompted them to head over straight away to the property. Officers found that the trespasser had actually entered into her neighbour's house and taken a bunch of stuff and then fled the crime scene. Now, Sydney obviously had video footage of this person that she was able to give to the police. This assisted them in tracking him down and then arresting him. The suspect is currently being held in jail in LA, and it was all thanks to Sydney keeping an eye on her Ring doorbell footage while she was at work.
Ребята, ушла быстрее! Быстрее все сюда! Все сюда! Туда, Юра, Юра, туда!
In January 2022, 40-year-old lawyer Anna Yuskova jumped into a river in Russia. On that day, she and her family were celebrating the Christian Orthodox Epiphany, which is a celebration where followers jump into blessed water to commemorate Jesus' baptism in the River Jordan. Now, on that day, it was -5 degrees Celsius, which is incredibly cold. But that didn't stop Anna from jumping into the river. Sadly, though, as you saw in that footage, once she jumped into this icy river, her body was quickly swept away by currents, and she was trapped under that extremely thick, extremely cold sheet of ice. It was pitch black under there, and she had no idea where she was. And I couldn't find any reports about her body ever being recovered, so I don't really know what happened to her. It is tragic, though, in that footage, as you can see her husband jump into the river to try find her, but it was too late and Anna was already gone. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
You know, Ghost Adventure.
Yeah.
They went to this place called Bobby Mackey's Music World. And that episode was crazy as well. Zach Bagans actually gets scratched.
Stop! Stop running! We're not running from you! Do this! Come on, do it! Did someone just scratch me?
There was a guy in that specific episode. His name was Carl Lawson and was the caretaker for that building. The employees there will always say that ever since he started working there, he started becoming more aggressive. His demeanor would change. It got so bad to the point where Carl actually ends up getting possessed. There's like a 6-hour recording, and the only thing you can find on YouTube is like a 30-minute one. You can never find the 6-hour one.
I hate possession videos, possession audios. They always have like weird ass energy, weird ass vibe to it.
It's scary because of what he says in the possession, bro.
And I'm gonna tell you what! There ain't a goddamn we're gonna ever come in this place again and try to run any of us off. Oh yes. Because there's thousands of us here. I don't care. I'm telling you. We were been here for almost 6,000 years. I'm telling you that you gotta leave tonight. I don't have to go nowhere. Yes, dude. This body is mine. No, it's not. This body is mine. No, it's not. No, it's not. No,
You know what a lot of people don't really mention or don't really think about? Where are they while they're getting possessed?
They're like souls.
Their actual souls. Like Carl, where is he? You know what I mean? Because the clips that I've seen of people getting possessed, even movies, they don't remember anything that happened.
18 months after his wife died, he married her caregiver, and that caregiver is now being accused of not only abusing him, but robbing him of millions of dollars. This story is the true definition of never knowing what goes on behind closed doors. This is 91-year-old Forrest Preston, and he's the founder of Life Care Centers, which is a nursing home chain founded in 1970. To this day, he is the sole owner of the company, which has over 200 nursing facilities and assisted living communities in 28 states. So in 2018, suddenly and seemingly out of nowhere, Forrest married 49-year-old Kim Phuong Nguyen. This happened just 18 months after his wife died, and what's crazy is the fact that Kim was his late wife's caregiver. They got married without any of Forrest's family knowing, so this was understandably a huge shock to his 4 kids. Ever since then, Kim and his family haven't really gotten along, but according to a recent court filing, Kim is now being accused of abusing Forrest, both physically and financially, and the findings and claims from this investigation are bizarre. Court documents state that Forrest has suffered from different stages of dementia since 2010, and he's currently disabled and unable to care for himself. Since the pandemic, Kim has reportedly isolated Forrest from his family and company officials. Meanwhile, and this is all alleged, she has funneled millions of his dollars worth of real estate and cash to herself and her family. Anytime Forrest has business calls, she will screen them, and not only that, she will attend all of his board meetings. It's being said that she makes all of his decisions for him and sometimes won't let him speak to important figures like lenders for months at a time, even in time-sensitive situations. Kim has also reportedly accused his employees of having affairs and would accept bribes, and she even threatened to kill a high-level life care executive who argued with her one time. She eventually got that executive fired. According to the legal filing, Kim once flashed a gun that she was wearing on her waistband to Forrest's family, saying that she would use it to protect him. Forrest's son has now filed for a conservatorship for his dad because he feels like he's not able to make the sound decisions needed to keep life care centers running. He feels that it's already bad enough that Kim has stolen so much money from Forrest, but now it seems like that isn't enough. Now it seems like she wants total control over the nursing home chain, and the decisions that she's been making are quite literally putting the company in jeopardy. It's gotten so bad that lenders are now refusing to move forward with the company until it can essentially get everything under control. Now the company is behind $100 million in deferred maintenance and equipment that hasn't properly been taken care of. It's had to recently close down or sell several facilities just to keep its head above water. What's really concerning is the fact that the last time Forrest was really seen in public was 2 years ago, and Kim was right by his side. His son began to worry about him and the company when, out of nowhere, Forrest suddenly said that he wanted to make his new wife the CEO of the company, even though she is really not qualified for that position. That, and when company executives and board members started contacting him, asking him what was really going on, and pretty much informing him that the whole company will likely fail if it continues down this path. Because of the recent legal accusations, a judge has ordered Forrest to undergo medical exams to determine whether or not he is mentally able to continue in his position with the company. He is going to be interviewed away from Kim and her family by a court-appointed attorney who will act as his guardian. Kim will also be interviewed as well. This entire case was filed under the Tennessee Adult Protection Act. This is just really sad to me because he quite literally dedicated his life to caring for the elderly and making sure they have a safe community. And now at 91, he's being taken advantage of. This isn't just a one-off situation either. People think that once you turn a certain age that you can pretty much just do whatever you want to them. And it's scary how often this happens.
On November 24th, 2009, John Jones, a 26-year-old medical student and father of one, entered the Nutty Putty Cave with family, excited to explore its depths. Little did they know this adventure would take a tragic turn. As they ventured further, John attempted to navigate a tight L-shaped passage known as Bob's Push. He believed it led to a larger opening, but instead he found himself in an even tighter squeeze. John then became trapped upside down in a passage barely 10 inches wide and 18 inches high, a horrifying position that restricted his breathing. John's family grew frantic. They called for help and rescue teams arrived quickly, and a complex rescue mission began. For 27 hours, rescuers worked around the clock, carefully chipping away at rock and attempting to free John from the impossible position. And at one point, rescue workers set up a sophisticated rope and pulley system in an attempt to extract him. But the system failed when put under strain, plunging John Jones back into the hole. But despite their best efforts, John's inverted position was putting immense strain on his body, restricting blood flow and making it harder to breathe by the minute. As the hours passed, John's body weakened. His heart couldn't bear the strain any longer. And tragically, after 27 hours, he passed away inside the Nutty Putty Cave. John's body could not be safely recovered, and in his memory, the Nutty Putty Cave was permanently sealed.
Thank you. Come here. Don't sit on the bed at night. No homo. No, just don't get close to the bed. Don't get close to the bed. But it's just like, yo, we want to thank you for hosting the thing, man. It's been a pleasure. You didn't have to do it, and you did it. No, I definitely didn't have to do it. I definitely didn't have to. First and foremost, I'm not getting in the bed. Shout out to him and what he did. I'm just gonna, if we can, let's just put the camera a little this way, just so we're not. I don't want my shot to even, I don't want it to come close to the bed at all. I should look like he fresh off a goddamn plane. I should fresh off the guard stage. That's my brother right here from day one. We used to wake up and, pause, but like, check this out. Back in the days when he was like 10 and I was a little bit older, his older brother, we used to fight over the frosted flakes. You know what I'm saying? Before pause was invented. You know what I'm saying? But it's my brother for real. We used to actually wrestle off of the frosted flakes because he used to always get up early. Now he's one of the richest dogs in the world. Yo, what the fuck did Puff just say? Nobody's gonna acknowledge this for me. Puff just said we used to wrestle over the frosted flakes, and we're streaming live. That was stupid.
I mean, that clip is incredibly bizarre, isn't it? And it just shows that P. Diddy had so many famous friends, so many people that allowed him to act however he wanted. Nobody ever checked P. Diddy's power. No one ever said anything. They just let him do what he wanted to do. And that, to me, is incredibly disturbing. If you want to join me in my journey to expose predators like this, listen to my podcast, The Conspiracy Files, available on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. There's also a video version of the podcast on YouTube, and I'm doing a full-length Diddy documentary in the near future.
You know the Malaysia flight MH370 that went missing?
Briefly remember, I'm not like educated on it.
Back in 2014, right? There was a Malaysia flight that was supposed to go from Malaysia to Beijing. It had over 227 passengers and 12 crew members. They take off out of nowhere. Their satellite system communications gets turned off, and that only gets turned off inside of the plane, bro. Eventually, they ended up taking a weird ass route, and at one point, it just disappears from any sort of radar. 3 years, different countries were helping to search for it, and they couldn't find anything.
How the f do they lose a big ass plane?
But the reason why it's also a little bit weird, a random ass person who had a Twitter named Straightaway, he posted on Twitter saying that he received a random ass voice memo from the black phone of a plane. Or he didn't know at the time that it was from the black phone of a plane.
Sierra, Oscar, Sierra, India, Tango, India, Sierra, Delta, India, Romeo, Echo, Foxtrot, Oscar.
I kind of remember that voicemail. Isn't that like the military alphabet?
Exactly, yeah, and he spelled it out. It spelled out SOS danger. They are not human. So when he posted it on Twitter, he started getting random ass messages telling him to delete it and shit. And he also ended up posting pictures and videos of people outside of his crib. Fuck. It's still a conspiracy to this day. Yeah. I don't know if they have found the plane yet. There's satellite video of unidentified objects like surrounding it and shit, and then out of nowhere it teleports. I don't know how real that video is.
What's a crime that happened near you that everyone should know about? I'll go first. This is Kai Zhuang. He's a Chinese foreign exchange student that was staying in Riverdale, Utah when he was cyber kidnapped last week. Kai was reported missing by his high school in Riverdale last Thursday after his family in China told school officials that they received a ransom note and a photo of Kai being held captive and in danger. The ransom note demanded $80,000, which his family paid. Upon investigating, Riverdale police went to the home of Kai's host family, but according to them, they had no idea that Kai was missing. They told authorities that he was sleeping in his bed Wednesday night and could hear him in his room Thursday morning. Police initially thought that he had been forcibly taken from his host home and was being held against his will, but that was not the case. Just a week prior, Kai was stopped by police in Provo, Utah, where they were concerned for his safety for some reason. He was purchasing camping gear and he was ultimately returned to his host family. After learning about this encounter, police used phone data and bank records to piece together where Kai could have possibly gone, because at this point it seemed as if he was trying to go off-grid. Just Sunday morning, Kai was found alive in a makeshift tent in the Utah mountains just outside of Brigham City. According to police, he was very scared and cold as there was no source of heat in the tent outside of a blanket. He also had very little food and water. Inside the tent, police also found multiple phones, which they believe he used to take the photos that were sent to his family in China. Kai told police that he was told by the cyber kidnappers to isolate himself, which he agreed to because he was scared that they were going to hurt him or his family. He said that he was being controlled and manipulated by these kidnappers for weeks, even during the encounter with Provo police. But he didn't tell them or his host family because he was scared. Riverdale police state that he was specifically targeted because he was a foreign exchange student, and he became the subject of an international online kidnapping scheme. After his rescue, he was cleared medically at the scene, made contact with his family back home, and he requested a warm cheeseburger to eat. According to the FBI, cyber kidnapping schemes are happening more and more across the US, and these cyber kidnappers are specifically targeting Chinese exchange students online, threatening their families back home. If you don't know, cyber kidnapping is when an online kidnapper or attacker tells a victim to isolate themselves and to provide them with photos as if they are being held captive. They then send these photos to the victim's family members in exchange for payment, and the victims usually go along with this out of fear of themselves or their families being harmed. Authorities are urging anyone who may be a victim of cyber kidnapping to stop contact with the suspect, don't send them money, and to immediately contact local authorities.
This guy right here is a very known brujo. He's known in the specific part in Mexico called Catemaco. He's one of the most powerful ones, and he's known for taking you to the devil's cave, La Cueva del Diablo.
Oh, okay.
And is the middleman between you and the devil to make a pact. He guides you through the whole process. After a certain time, it's just you and the devil. But there's this one video, and he was talking about the reason why he has stopped doing pacts no more with the devil.
Porque la última vez me llegó un señor con un niño de 4 años y quería pactar, pero él quería ofrendar a ese niño. Un niño que no había vivido su vida. Él no quería control, él lo que quería era avaricia.
¿Qué ritual hace para ofrendar al niño?
Lo desmiembra con un cuchillo, con una daga. Esa sangre se lo quitan a los niños cuando ellos están en lo peor del miedo. Cuando tienen esa adrenalina es cuando se les saca la sangre a los bebés, a los niños.
What? ¿Se les saca la sangre mientras están vivos?
O mientras tienen miedo.
He ended up saying is that you have to drink the child's blood when the child is at the highest peak of fear, and it's some sort of like drug.
Because of the adrenaline that they get.
That energy gets carried on into your body. It's like you feel some sort of high. They'd rather have them, keep them around scared than kill them. This goes on to the whole conspiracy revolving Monsters Inc. Right?
Well, okay, I think I know where you're gonna go with this, bro.
In Monsters Inc., their whole world, their whole city is powered by what?
Fear.
Coming from who?
The children.
Exactly. They don't kill the children. They keep them around in a constant state of
fear
and live off of that. And how does the liquid look when it powers up?
Blood.
A lawyer's duty is clear: defend their client with loyalty, confidentiality, and trust. But what happens when a defense attorney breaks that sacred bond, not to protect the innocent, but to help the police catch criminals? This is the story of Nicola Gabo, the defense attorney who became Australia's most notorious police informant. Keep watching for an exclusive Wondery Plus offer. Nicola Gabo was once a rising star in the Australian legal world. Born into a prominent Melbourne family, she studied law with aspirations of justice. Her career began with a focus on defending high-profile criminals, drug lords, gangsters, and the infamous figures of Melbourne's underworld. She was respected for her sharp legal mind and persuasive arguments. But behind the scenes, there was something else at play. The woman defending Melbourne's most dangerous criminals was also feeding their secrets to the very people who wanted to put them behind bars. Her role as an informant was simple but dangerous: provide police with detailed intel on criminal operations, drug deals, and even murder plots, all while continuing to represent her clients in court. For years, Nicola Gabo's double life remained hidden, but her actions represented a fundamental betrayal of the legal profession. As a defense attorney, she was supposed to protect her clients to ensure that they had a fair trial. Instead, she was helping the police dismantle the very criminal network she was being paid to defend. The way this story unfolds is mind-blowing. We all know Wondery is the place to feed your true crime podcast obsession, and you can now get ad-free exclusive listening with Wondery Plus. Get 60 days free of Wondery Plus with code LAWYER60 when you head over to wondery.fm/lawyer60.
Could a teenager have accidentally burned to death inside of an oven at Walmart? Something hideous happened on the 19th of October this year at Walmart in Canada. Now, the shop had apparently been looking to remove the walk-in ovens from the stores, but before they were able to, tragedy would strike. Gurismaran Kaur, aged 19, moved to Canada 2 years ago with her mum from India. The pair both worked at the Walmart store, and on the day in question, the girl's mum realised she hadn't been able to get hold of her in a while. It had been roughly an hour, so she went looking and tried to investigate. After looking high and low, her mum eventually discovered her daughter's body locked in an oven. A frantic call came into emergency services, and a dispatch officer told them, "Female is locked in an oven in the bakery. Oven is on, unsure if the staff are able to turn it off." Gurismaran was removed from the oven, but tragically it was too late. Her mum was obviously completely traumatized by this whole situation, and it remains somewhat a mystery how she even ended up there in the first place. Walmart employees have posted videos online claiming that the whole situation is really strange. They have stated there would be no way that she would get in of her own accord, and some have claimed that the door is really hard to open. There were apparently no tasks that would ever require anyone to actually physically get inside of the oven. One employee stated, "You have to push with all your might to pull the handle to the side and lock it in place." They added, "There is no way possible that someone could lock themselves in there."
Guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another video. If it's your first time here, or if it's your first time watching my videos, hi.
The woman you just saw in that video murdered her own daughter with the help of 2 family members because she believed that her daughter was possessed by a demon. This is Claudia Hernandez. In September of 2021, Claudia thought her 2-year-old daughter Arlie was acting weird. According to her, her daughter's eyes changed. They were vacant and empty. She claimed that her daughter's voice wasn't her own, and she said that she knew she was possessed by a demon. Claudia told investigators, "I knew it was a demon because I go to church." So at one point, Claudia put her fingers into her daughter's mouth to try to force her to vomit, and when she did that, her daughter bit down on her. She claimed that's when she knew this was a possession, and so she brought her daughter into a church. Claudia then got her brother and her father to meet them at the church, and they performed an exorcism on the little girl. An exorcism that lasted over 20 hours, where the 3 of them were putting their hands around the girl's neck, choking her out, abusing her, holding her up in the air, throwing her around, screaming at her. And heartbreakingly, even when Arlie told her own mother, "I love you," as she was dying, Claudia claimed that that was a demon. Now, that video I showed you at the beginning of this was actually posted after Claudia had murdered her daughter. Yeah, she thought she'd start up a YouTube channel after killing her kid. Obviously, that didn't end up going too well because she was arrested. And this story's flat out disturbing. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
A missing North Carolina teenager was just found hidden under a trap door in this man's home in a completely different state. And what he has to say about it is horrifying.
She hid on her own free will. She was actually in the bed when the officers first come in there. Her grandma kicked her out. She didn't appear to be that age. She had all kinds of piercings.
In December, a 16-year-old girl left her grandparents' home in North Carolina after a fight and disappeared. She was officially reported missing on December 6th, and her grandparents feared the worst. But what they didn't know was that 3 weeks prior to her disappearance, a 34-year-old man named Zachary Jones found the girl online and started talking to her. And he actually lured her from her home after the fight with her grandparents. Zachary then drove the girl all the way back to his home in Lincoln County, Kentucky, where he repeatedly sexually assaulted her and gave her drugs. Fast forward to Christmas Day. Zachary's mom called 911 to report a domestic violence incident between Zachary and who she thought was his girlfriend. And when police arrived at the home, he said the girl was not there. He was quickly cuffed and placed in the back of a cop car after authorities found drugs in the home. And when they went back inside to search for the girl, they found something incredibly disturbing. Locked inside of a trap door hidden under a rug in Zachary's bedroom was a young girl who authorities say appeared very high. After investigating, the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office realized that the young girl was reported missing nearly a month prior out of North Carolina. According to the girl, whose name has not been released, she said that Zachary initially told her that he was 19 online, but when she met up with him in North Carolina, he looked much older. It was there that he said he was 25, and it wasn't until they got all the way back to his home that she found out that he was actually 34. The girl said that Zachary was always armed with a gun and that he forced her to tell his family that she was 18. He also threatened to kill her many times and proceeded to sexually assault her and give her drugs, sometimes even strangling her during the assaults. When the girl was rescued, Zachary denied choking her and said that she hid in the trap door on her own free will. But the girl had very visible marks on her neck that proved otherwise. The victim also said that on their drive back to his house, they were pulled over by a cop, and Zachary told her that he would shoot the officer if they were asked to get out of the car. Zachary was arrested and is being held at the Pulaski County Jail, while the girl was taken to the hospital for treatment and was reunited with her grandparents. In an interview from jail, Zachary admitted to all of it, but said that she told him that she was 18. He said that she didn't look to be 16 as she had all sorts of piercings, and that he was helping her after her grandparents kicked her out, which was not true. Zachary is facing 30 different charges in just Kentucky, but he's also facing more charges in North Carolina as well. He's being held without bond, and judging by his lack of remorse, I truly hope that he never gets out, because this story is absolutely terrifying.
Case will make you terrified to drive your car at night. Hannah Cornelius was a stunning 21-year-old South African student. She went to Stellenbosch University and was a very popular girl. Her friends described her as outgoing with a huge smile. She had her whole life ahead of her when she met an absolutely brutal fate. On the 27th of May 2017, Hannah was out with a male friend named Cheslin Marsh. The pair had met a few months earlier and he was a student too. She'd driven out, so she offered to take him back home, give him a lift back to his flat basically. As they arrived at his flat, suddenly a real-life horror film unfolded. The car was ambushed by a gang of 4 men. They were armed with screwdrivers as weapons. They forced Cheslin into the boot of the car. Hannah was held still by 2 men in the front of the car who were holding a screwdriver into her chest. Now the gang then took control of the vehicle and drove it to a cash machine and took Cheslin's bank card off him. They asked him for his PIN number, and because he gave them a wrong PIN number, they got really angry. They drove the pair to a remote location where all hell would break loose. They launched into a vicious attack on Cheslin, smacking him with bricks and then leaving him for dead. They continued on with Hannah in the car, who was obviously absolutely terrified by this point. The gang then stopped at a vineyard and brutally SA'd her. They then stabbed her in the neck before dropping this huge boulder on her head twice. Now Hannah stood absolutely no chance of survival. Miraculously, Cheslin managed to pull through, albeit with horrific injuries. He had clambered into somebody's back garden shouting for help, and the person then flagged down a car and they took him to a nearby hospital. But the gang were not satisfied and they took Hannah's stolen vehicle and then preyed upon another woman before eventually being apprehended by police. The 4 men were arrested and they were Vernon Whitboy, aged 33, Geraldo Parsons, aged 27, Nashville Julius, aged 29, and Eben van Nieberg, 28. They were questioned by police, but they were evasive. I think they knew that there was a lot of evidence against them and they might have been captured on CCTV, so they admitted to having been there, but none of them admitted to the actual R or murder. Despite this, thankfully all 4 were found guilty and 3 of them got given life sentences. Cheslin is left with brutal head injuries and is deaf in 1 ear. He's obviously also deeply scarred by the events. Tragically, both of Hannah's parents passed away after her death. Her mum got extremely weak, obviously dealing with such horrific trauma, and she eventually passed away in a swimming accident, and Hannah's dad died from cancer.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
You'll never look at a mall Santa the same way after hearing this story. So this photo was taken around 1920 in a Christmas fair happening outside of Boston. The young child in this photo is Alberta Porter, the daughter of Robert Porter, who was supposed to be Boston's next mayor. Apparently, this Santa had set up around the corner from the rest of the fair and was not visible from the rest of the fair. Robert and his daughter actually didn't even see the Santa until they were walking home. The line to see Santa inside of the fair was way too long, so when Alberta saw this Santa, she started crying and begging her dad to take a photo with him. So this photo was taken, and afterwards, the Santa asked if Alberta wanted to go on a short ride on the donkey. And she starts crying and begging her father again, so he agrees. But Alberta never returned. An hour went by and Santa still hadn't brought her back. Robert ran into the fair to ask an employee how long the donkey rides typically last, but the employee seemed really confused. There was no Santa with donkey rides at this fair. The employee pointed to the Santa who had a long line of children out in front of him and said that was the only Santa at the fair. Alberta was never found, and Robert actually dropped out of politics to spend his entire life and savings on finding her and the man who took her, and never did.
These are the updates regarding the 4 Idaho students that were murdered. On November 14th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students were found stabbed to death in their beds in a home that they shared. The victims were 20-year-old Ethan, 21-year-old Kaylee, 21-year-old Madison, and 20-year-old Xana. The 4 victims also lived in the home with 2 other roommates who were not hurt, and records show that one of the roommates heard crying coming from Xana's room and the voice of a man. That same roommate also made eye contact with the murderer, and he walked right past her, but she could not recognize him because he was wearing a mask. But almost 2 months later, police finally arrested 28-year-old Brian Kohlberger, who was also a PhD student at Washington State University studying criminology. Records show that his phone was near the victim's home hours after the murder and was used about a dozen times near their home since last June. His white Hyundai was also captured on surveillance, and he decided to change his license plate 5 days after the murders. This is where things get a little creepy. So records show that sometime last year, he posted a research survey on Reddit asking ex-convicts to share their experience and feelings about past murders they've committed. And now people are comparing Brian to Ted Bundy and think that he has been studying and planning how to get away with murder for a while now.
This girl killed her mum so that she wouldn't find out she got kicked out of school. On the 3rd of March 2020, police were called to do a welfare check at a property in Ohio. Brenda Powell lived in the house, the 50-year-old mother of Sydney Powell. Brenda had actually been on the phone with Sydney's former school. This was the University of Mount Union. Now, during the telephone call, a staff member heard repeated thuds and screaming, so authorities were alerted. Inside, they found Brenda Powell in a serious condition. She was rushed to hospital but died from her injuries. Brenda had been unaware that her 19-year-old daughter had been kicked out of the school. During her telephone conversation, Brenda was struck in the head and then stabbed nearly 30 times by Sydney. However, when police investigated the murder, Sydney tried to claim that there had been a break-in. She told them that there had been a noise and her mum had instructed her to run away. She said she heard screaming, and when she ran back in, her mum was on the floor. Investigators saw through her lies and she eventually changed her story. At her trial, she pled not guilty by reason of insanity. Her defense argued that Sydney was suffering from undiagnosed schizophrenia. They stated that she killed while experiencing a psychotic episode. However, it is rare for people with schizophrenia to act violently. It was concluded that Sydney had been exaggerating her symptoms. She's recently been found guilty and is awaiting sentencing.
The mystery of the Bloody Children's Playhouse is one that will haunt you, especially because it's still unsolved. So January 2012 in Australia, the staff of Riverwood Primary School discover a massive pool of blood inside of a children's playhouse on property. This is the actual playhouse pictured here. The blood puddle was over 30 centimeters wide and contained about 1.5 liters worth of blood. That's a lot of blood. So obviously they called the authorities in to try to see what the hell had happened, how this blood had ended up in a kid's play area, and they did some tests on it and discovered that it belonged to a young male. But they couldn't find any matches, they didn't know who the blood belonged to, and this amount of blood was much more than simply a bloody nose or an injury. Authorities believe this would have had to be a substantial wound that this young boy or man had to have sustained in there. They even said that there's no real way that they should have been able to actually walk out of the clubhouse, and that they would have had to be carried by somebody. But this story gets even stranger. So when the authorities looked into recent missing persons cases, or absent student records from the school, they couldn't find anybody that had gone missing around that time. The police also searched through hospital records for that time period because obviously somebody losing that much blood would have had to go to the hospital, but nobody had checked themselves in around that time with any sort of injury that matched what could have happened inside of that cabin. So the police to this day think that this blood belonged to a young child who was probably murdered. But keep in mind, this is a small cabin built for children to play inside of, so adults can't even stand up straight inside of it. There was also no blood trail leading in or outside of the building. Police have searched the areas around the wetlands and all of the forests and areas in that town. They haven't found any trace of a child, and no children have been reported missing. So to this day, this is a case that haunts me, that really confuses me, and I'd like to think that there might be some sort of closure in the case at some point, but this is a story that I really think will never have an ending. But let me know your theories on what might have happened here below.
This is why babysitting always freaks me out. So in 2014, Sarah DeWalt was babysitting for a new family that had just moved into her neighborhood in Ohio. The family consisted of 2 young children under 10, but when Sarah showed up that night, the parents kept talking as if they had 3 children. There were 3 sets of pajamas laid out, there were 3 bowls of ice cream on the counter, but the family clearly only had the 2 kids. So that night, Sarah and the kids are winding down watching a movie when all of a sudden Sarah starts hearing noises in the house. There were footsteps shuffling like someone else was there, and she had this overwhelming feeling that she was being watched. So she gets up to check on the noise, but then the kids turn to her and say, "Oh, that's Bonnie. Don't bother her." Sarah leaves it because she's freaked out, but then later that night she goes to check the nanny cam and she sees this image captured in the hallway. She stayed up until the parents came home, but she never went back after that.
This woman paid child support to her daughter's father for 13 years, completely unaware that he'd actually murdered her at the age of 6. This story is actually unbelievable, and one of the defendants is actually now facing the death penalty. On January 28, 2012, the skeletal remains of a young child were found at Brookhaven Trailer Park in Opelika, Alabama. Detectives determined that the remains belonged to an African-American girl aged 4 to 7 years old, and it was evident that she'd been abused prior to her death. Her bones showed evidence of breaks that had healed, she was malnourished, and she had an injury to her left eye socket. Forensic artists created this image of what she may have looked like, and she became known as the Opelika Jane Doe or Baby Jane Doe. It took years and years and lots of tests at the University of South Florida, and finally in 2017 it was determined that she lived in the southeast of the United States. The Opelika Police Department then teamed up with Othram Laboratories to use advanced DNA testing and genetic genealogy. A comprehensive genealogical profile was uploaded to a database, and finally in January 2023 the identity of Jane Doe was revealed. The remains belonged to 6-year-old Amor Javea Wiggins, who lived with her father and stepmother. Amor's mother, Sherry Wiggins, lived in Maryland, and she provided police with documents that showed that Amor's father and stepmother, Lamar and Ruth, had obtained legal custody of her in 2009, and it was at this time that contact with Amor's mother stopped. Despite not being allowed to see her daughter, she'd continuously paid child support since 2009. On January 17, 2023, Lamar and Ruth were arrested, and in March a hearing was held. Ruth claims that she'd become overwhelmed at having to look after Amor, so she'd asked Lamar to take her to live with family members, and that was the last time that she'd seen her. Lamar has actually confessed to murdering Amor, but says he didn't inflict any of the injuries prior to her death, and he's asked that Ruth not be charged in her murder. Ruth has since been bailed, and she has to wear an ankle monitor while she awaits trial. She's facing up to 10 years in prison. Lamar, however, was refused bail and he remains in custody. The trial's ongoing and he faces life imprisonment or the death penalty. I'll keep an eye on the case and obviously update with any developments in the comments.
This woman murdered over her obsessive need to keep shopping. In February 1994, Dana Sue Gray was in financial trouble. She'd gradually been spending more and more, well beyond her means. When she lost her job, her finances only got worse. In a desperate attempt to feed her shopping addiction, she started to do the unthinkable. Her first victim is thought to be Norma Davis. She was 86 when she was killed. Dana was never actually convicted of committing this crime due to lack of evidence. Now, Norma was actually the mother-in-law of the woman who married Dana's dad. She knew Norma well, and on February the 16th, 94, Norma was found deceased by a neighbour. She'd been stabbed and there was no sign of forced entry. This led police to believe that the killer was probably somebody that Norma knew. She had likely willingly let the person into the house. And remember this part, the phone cord was unplugged. Now, 66-year-old June Roberts was found dead shortly after on February the 28th. Dana had gone round to her house to borrow a book off her, so June let her inside. Dana unplugged the phone from the wall and used the cord to strangle June. She then stole her credit cards and went on a shopping spree. A month later, on March the 16th, Dana took her next victim. 87-year-old Dora Beebe had just come home from the doctors when Dana arrived at her house. She asked her for some directions and she was let in. Once inside, she attacked her and killed her. Again, she stole credit cards to go on a shopping spree. She was eventually caught when she tried to kill Dorinda Hawkins. She again tried to use a telephone wire to kill her, but Dorinda, who had been left for dead, actually survived. She was then luckily able to provide police with a detailed description of what her attacker looked like. Dana was caught and found guilty and sentenced to life without parole.
Hello to all on this glorious Sunday evening. So I just thought, why not? I'm gonna do a live stream because this day next week is Christmas. What more could you want for Christmas other than an evening?
At the time that live stream was playing on YouTube, the man in the video, Stephen McCullough from Ireland, was busy murdering his partner. So this is Stephen. He was a YouTuber. He posted a lot of different random videos. He would stream and make video game live streams. And at one point in his life, he met this woman, Natalie McNally. Now, Stephen was 33, Natalie was 32 when this all happened, and when they met, they fell in love really quickly. And soon after the two met, Natalie became pregnant. She was actually 15 weeks pregnant at the time of her death. So, in later findings, it was discovered that at some point, Stephen had discovered that his partner Natalie had been communicating with another man online. And to Stephen, that was enough to sign a death sentence. So Stephen went to work planning the murder of Natalie. He pre-recorded that 6-hour-long live stream, he announced it on Twitter, and then on the evening of December 18th, 2022, Stephen aired this pre-recorded live stream on YouTube, acting like it was happening live. He even titled the stream on YouTube Violent Night Christmas Gaming Stream, which authorities have stated they believe was a clue Stephen was dropping as to what he was actually up to while this live stream was airing. So Stephen was allegedly doing this live stream in a place where he wasn't with his partner Natalie. And even though the stream started at about 4 p.m. that afternoon, at around 9 p.m. a figure was seen entering the home that he shared with Natalie. A few moments later, she is heard screaming, and then the figure leaves again, is taken by taxi to another location, and the authorities identified that figure as Stephen. As it turns out, in the days and weeks leading up to the murder of Natalie, Stephen had actually researched the most painful ways to die on Google. He'd looked up various murder methods, and it seemed like he had been planning this thing out very methodically. On that evening, Natalie, who was known to be just such a sweet woman and was remembered so fondly by her friends and family, was stabbed multiple times in her home. So after Natalie's murder, Stephen acted like he had no idea what had happened. And Natalie's family members even allowed him 20 minutes alone with her body on Christmas. They thought that at the time he was a grieving partner, not the person who had actually taken Natalie's life. I mean, there are so many sketchy things that Stephen did before and after Natalie's murder. At one point, he even left a phone recording in the same room as Natalie's family for 40 minutes just to try to see if they thought he was guilty of something. And even though he thought he was being smart and he would never be caught for this horrific crime, he's already been imprisoned.
I think most of us are familiar with this photo, but I wasn't sure about covering this case because no crime has ever been proven. But I'm interested to know your thoughts on the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Madeleine was just 3 years old when she went missing while on holiday with her parents and her younger brother and sister. It was the evening of May 3rd, 2007 in Praia da Luz in Portugal, and according to Madeleine's parents, all three of them were put to bed and were fast asleep by 8:30 p.m. Kate and Jerry went out to dine with friends at a restaurant that was around 55 metres away, as the crow flies. However, the apartment couldn't be seen from the restaurant and they had to travel up a public street and through the hotel to get to the apartment doors, which was over 80 metres walk. Kate, Jerry and their friends periodically checked on the children around every half an hour, but when Kate went to check at 10 p.m, Madeleine was not in her bed and she hasn't been seen since. The door to the apartment had been left unlocked by Kate and Jerry, and from the restaurant the roof of the apartment could be seen, but not the windows or doors, so they couldn't be sure whether Madeleine had just wandered off or whether she'd been taken. But Kate ran back to the restaurant and leaving the twins by themselves, screaming, "Madeleine's gone, someone's taken her." A massive search was launched and locals got involved as well, just assuming that Madeleine could have wandered off. Strangely, the apartment wasn't closed off or marked as a crime scene, despite police suspecting that she'd been abducted. She'd left her favourite cuddly toy on the bed, and they assumed that if she'd just wandered off, she would have taken that with her. DNA from one stranger was found in the apartment, but they couldn't do anything about it because as the apartment wasn't closed off, multiple people had walked through the apartment and left their DNA. Roadblocks weren't put in place until 10 a.m. the next day, and also border control weren't given a description of Madeleine until hours after her disappearance. Police have identified suspects since Madeleine's disappearance, and this is currently the #1 prime suspect, Christian Bruckner. According to media reports, he did live in the area that Madeleine went missing around the time that she went missing, and he's also being charged for separate sex offences in 2005 in that same area. He is currently still a suspect in Madeleine's disappearance, and the investigation against him is ongoing. Kate and Jerry were obviously questioned by police, and strangely, Kate refused to answer 48 of their questions. These included: when you entered the apartment, what did you see? What did you do? Where did you look? What did you touch? Why did you say Madeleine had been abducted? Assuming Madeleine had been abducted, why did you leave the twins to go back to the restaurant and raise the alarm? What was Madeleine's behaviour like? What was Madeleine's relationship like with her brother and sister? Is it true that in England you considered handing over Madeleine's custody to a relative? In England, did you medicate your children? They were also questioned about the fact that sniffer dogs detected human blood behind the sofa in the apartment, as well as in the boot of a car rented by the McCanns. The sniffer dogs also detected a human corpse in that same vehicle. Finally, Kate was asked, did you have any responsibility or intervention in your daughter's disappearance? She refused to answer any of these questions. Kate then went on to write a book about her daughter's disappearance, and this obviously made the family a lot of money, and they ended up making 2 mortgage repayments from the Madeleine Fund. To date, the McCanns have had around £3 million in public funding to help find their missing daughter. It's now been 17 years and there hasn't been a single sighting or lead that's led to anything promising, and Madeleine, now aged 20, remains a missing person. I'd really like to get your take on this case because there are so many opinions on it, and I would like to know what you think in the comments.
It's February 2017, and a man named David Krupa hands a detective a tablet. Inside is a memory card that he thinks contains the evidence that will help them catch his stalker and allow his life to finally go back to normal. Together they sift through thousands of deleted images, but there's one photo that is not like the others. And at first, the detective isn't quite sure what he's looking at. Reddish tones, skin, but then they see a familiar tattoo. And it's this detail that begins to unravel the 5-year mystery of a deranged stalker. Rewind to spring 2012. Dave Krupa is 37 years old and has just moved to Omaha, Nebraska and is looking for a fresh start. He's recently ended a 12-year relationship with his ex-girlfriend Amy, who gave him an ultimatum basically saying, you need to marry me or I'm out. Dave soon joins the dating site Plenty of Fish to see if he can find someone who just wants to have a good time and isn't looking for something serious. That's where he meets Shanna Liz Gollier, who simply goes by Liz. At first, things are great. The two regularly go on dates, which are pretty casual, but when things start to become more intimate, Liz wants something serious. Dave, on the other hand, isn't quite ready to get into a relationship yet, so he tells her that he wants to see other people. In October of 2017, Dave is working at his auto shop when a woman walks in that catches his eye. Her name is Carrie Farver, and she comes into the shop because her SUV is acting up again. A few days pass by, and while scrolling on the dating site Plenty of Fish, Dave comes across Carrie's profile, so he reaches out and sets up a date. However, just 2 weeks after seeing each other, he starts falling for this girl, and thinks to himself, maybe I am ready for another serious relationship. On November 13th, 2012, Dave kisses Carrie goodbye, saying that he'll see her later after she gets back from work. A few hours pass by, and that's when Dave gets a text. Carrie messages him suggesting that the two should move in together, but Dave disagrees. And when he replies no, she texts him back in all caps, fine. I don't ever want to see you again. And soon, Liz starts receiving messages too, demanding that she stay away from Dave or something bad was gonna happen. One night, she pulls into her garage and sees another message. Not on her phone, but spray painted on her wall reading, from Dave. Liz's house is torched and burned to the ground. Dave is sent a picture of a body tied up in the trunk of a car, and the two both receive a fake obituary of Liz's death. Meanwhile, this consistent harassment is actually bringing Dave and Liz closer, and they bond over the horrors that this woman is putting them through. One night, while Dave is driving home in January of 2013, he spots a familiar vehicle in the parking lot of his apartment. Upon closer inspection, he realizes that it's Carrie's SUV, so he calls the police, who find little to no evidence surrounding her disappearance. However, they do manage to scrape a fingerprint off a mint container in her car, and this DNA will become crucial later in the story. This pattern of psychological and sometimes physical torment goes on for years until Dave finally decides that he's had enough. He changes his phone number, purchases a gun, and moves to Council Bluffs, Iowa, where he's forced to end his relationship with Liz. Almost immediately after the move, the gun goes missing. After Dave gets settled into his new home, the local sheriff's department takes a special interest in his case. They request that both Dave and Liz hand over their phones so they can trace Carrie's digital footprint, but when they download the data, they make a shocking revelation. After sifting through images, videos, passwords, and previous locations, they discover that it isn't Carrie who's sending these messages, it's none other than Shanna Liz Golyer. On Liz's phone, they discover that she has 20 separate email accounts, all being used to impersonate Carrie. As detectives continue building their case, gathering evidence against Liz, she actually shows up at the sheriff's department to file a complaint. She proceeds to claim that Amy Flora, Dave's ex-wife, is a total stalker. Cleverly, one of the officers says, if only Amy would implicate herself, meaning reveal herself to be the perpetrator, and thus setting in Liz's head a psychological trap. Now as intelligent and conniving as she appears to be, the next day Liz dials 911 and tells them that Amy Flora has just shot her in the leg. And when investigators ask for more proof, Liz forwards them several emails from Amy confessing to both shooting her and impersonating Dave's ex-girlfriend Carrie. Liz thinks this plan is foolproof. It is the perfect cover-up. But the IP address attached to the emails, along with the countless other messages, all trace back to Liz. Further, police are able to match the fingerprint from the mint container in Carrie's car to Liz's DNA. And to top it all off, the bullet that was shot into Liz's leg is from the barrel of Dave's missing gun. In December 2016, Liz's case is taken to trial where she faces being charged with first-degree murder and arson. Prosecutors say that this is a case of obsession. During the trial, Dave hands over a tablet containing a memory card. On it, a grainy picture of a foot with a tattoo. It's identified that the foot had been decomposing for several days when the photo was taken, and the tattoo was a Chinese symbol identical to Carrie's, finally proving that she was dead. On May 24, 2017, Shanna Liz Golyer is found guilty of first-degree murder and arson and is sentenced to life in prison. She's currently serving out her sentence where she continues to behave in evil, manipulative ways, not revealing where Carrie's body is and denying her family of closure.
This woman screamed, "I don't want to die," as she was dragged to her death in a horrifying theme park incident. Kelty Byrne was a Canadian student animal trainer and competitive swimmer. She was working at Sealand of the Pacific to earn extra money, and this involved being trained to work with orcas, otherwise known as killer whales. In controversial theme parks such as Sealand of the Pacific and SeaWorld, huge animals are either bred in captivity or traumatically captured and ripped apart from their families and natural habitats for humans' entertainment. On February the 20th, 1991, Kelty was working a shift and 3 whales were in one of the pools, including the infamous Tilikum. In a horrific turn of events, Kelty accidentally slipped and fell into the whale pool and attempted to grab onto the edge and save herself. However, before she could do so, she was grabbed by one of the whales that dragged her into the pool. The 3 whales then began throwing Kelty around, with many speculating that they may have simply thought this was a game. Others theorised that the whales were so traumatised and angered by their lives in tiny little pools that they took it out on Kelty. She was dragged under the water and then back up, screaming, "I don't want to die." After this horrific ordeal, she eventually drowned. It's reported that she was absolutely covered in bruises, was completely battered, and also covered in teeth marks.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What?
Some are calling this the most horrific fraternity hazing ever in the United States. This is how one night at university can destroy your life forever. Danny Santulli was 18 years old and a freshman at the Uni of Missouri. In October 2021, Danny was captured on CCTV being blindfolded and led downstairs in an event named Pledge Dad Reveal Night. Danny was made to drink a litre of straight vodka by himself. At around 10:55, Danny collapsed and some of the frat members were seen carrying him to a sofa. Around midnight, Danny was captured on cameras sliding off the sofa, and shortly after he was found unconscious with blue lips. Shockingly, instead of calling an ambulance for Danny, the frat members piled him into a car, dropping him on the way. They drove him to hospital, but at this point he was already in cardiac arrest. Danny had to be resuscitated and spent the next 6 weeks in intensive care. Prior to this evening, Danny had been left needing stitches and crutches after he'd been forced to climb inside of a bin with broken glass inside. 2 nights before the night in question, Danny broke down in tears on the phone to his sister and told her about how stressed he felt about it all. His family had begged him to quit the pledge, but he didn't want to be ridiculed. This is Danny now. He will need full-time care for the rest of his life. He's now severely brain damaged, is blind, and cannot walk or talk. 2 former students are set to go to trial over this case. If I didn't know this was a true crime case, I would think it was a disturbing horror film. On the morning of the 7th of October 2022, a barefoot woman was running around Excelsior Springs, Missouri, bashing on people's doors. Witnesses describe her looking like she came straight from a horror film and she was calling for help. She'd been beaten, held captive, and SA'd for weeks. The woman was a shocking sight. She was covered in injuries and was wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was gasping for breath as she had a very tight metal collar locked around her neck. It was a nurse who opened the door to her and let her come in. The nurse started to call police, and at this point the woman panicked. She warned her that the captor would kill her and claimed that he had killed her 2 friends. When police got there, the woman explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month prior. He'd been holding her hostage this whole time. She said he'd been keeping her locked in the basement and had been SAing her. Disturbingly, she told police that he actually had a young son who lived at the house with him. When Timothy had taken his young son to school the one day, she used it as her opportunity to escape. Police made their way to the home of 39-year-old Timothy Haslett Jr. and found the property did in fact have a basement like the woman described. Timothy was arrested and is facing 9 charges, including first-degree kidnapping. He's being held on a $3 million bond and faces 5 life sentences. Before his arrest, police were actually called to his address 3 times. Twice they were asked to do welfare checks, and this was from an employer and also family members. Police have searched his home with cadaver dogs and they haven't yet released what they know. This is the UK's most famous missing boy. In September 2007, Andrew Gosden was just 14 years old. He was a very intelligent boy and was top of his class in most classes at school. He was an introvert that usually spent most of his time at home. The day before Andrew went missing seemed completely normal. He went to school, he had some tea, and then he watched some TV. However, on September the 14th, he seemed more irritable than normal. Instead of getting the bus to school that morning like his parents thought he was, he went to a cash point and withdrew £200. CCTV then captures him walking home, where he changed his clothes into a Slipknot t-shirt. When he left the house, he didn't take his charger with him, and he also didn't take £100 that he'd saved up. He didn't take his passport, but he did take his house key, which indicates he was going to come home. He bought a one-way ticket to London and was last seen leaving King's Cross Station at about 11:30. Frustratingly, the school had actually tried to contact Andrew's parents to say that he hadn't turned up to school that day, but they dialed the wrong number and left an answer phone message on the wrong phone. His family was completely cleared of any suspicion, and the family and the school and all of the students went to London and they were handing out loads of flyers. Weirdly, a year after this incident, a man came to a police station to say that he had information about Andrew. Now, the police station was unmanned, so the person spoke to this man just over an intercom system and sent a police officer down there. Mysteriously, by the time the police officer arrived, the person had vanished. This is what Andrew might look like now, just being the age that he may be if he's still alive. Theories about this case is that he may have gone to London to meet up with someone or go to a concert. Was he lured there by somebody with bad intentions, or was he just going there for the day, gonna come back, and was at the wrong place at the wrong time and somebody did something bad to him? In 2009, the family paid for a search of the River Thames to try and find some sort of closure. The search did find a body, but it wasn't Andrew's. The most up-to-date information that we have on this case is that 2 men were arrested on suspicion of kidnapping Andrew, but they've actually been released.